Γεια σας φίλοι μου. Θα δούμε σήμερα την ιστορία του Dr. Eben Alexander, πάνω από 25 χρόνια ακαδημαϊκός στην Νευροχειρουργική στο Χάρβαρτ στη Βοστόνη. Όλα αυτά τα χρόνια μελέτησε και ερεύνησε εκατοντάδες ασθενείς που είχαν σοβαρά προβλήματα στο επίπεδο συνειδητότητας. Επειδή βρίσκονταν σε κόμμα, είτε είχαν όγκους στον εγκέφαλο, ανευρίσματα, εγκεφαλικές μολύνσεις ή εγκεφαλικά επεισόδια. Πίστευε πως ήξερε καλά το πως η συνειδητότητα εξαρτάται αποκλειστικά και μόνο από τον εγκέφαλο. Όμως, τον Νοέμβριο του 2008 έπεσε ο ίδιος σε κόμμα από ένα σπάνιο και μυστήριο βακτήριο που του προκάλεσε μηνυγκοεγκεφαλίτιδα. Ήταν μια ολόκληρη εβδομάδα σε κόμμα και είχε πολύ λίγες πιθανότητες να επιβιώσει.
This kind of meningitis is such a perfect model for human death. In fact, there's a medical case report on my medical record in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases, which goes a long way to help strengthen my story. Basically, it says my brain could not have had a dream or hallucination. They all happened while my brain was demonstrably offline.
Ο Dr. Eben λέει ότι τον πρώτο καιρό δεν μπορούσε να κοιμηθεί από την full ενέργεια που ένιωθε μετά από αυτή την πνευματική εμπειρία που έζησε, που θα την δούμε παρακάτω στο βίντεο. Όμως δεν μπορούσε να το πιστέψει το τι είχε συμβεί. Του φαινόταν ότι είχε ζήσει κάτι υπερβολικά πραγματικό, ένα ultra reality όπως το ονομάζει, αλλά πίστευε ότι ήταν κάτι σαν παρέστηση του εγκεφάλου του. Όμως όταν μετά από εβδομάδες τσέκαρε τα ιατρικά του αρχεία, κατάλαβε ότι ήταν αδύνατον να είναι όνειρο ή να είναι παρέστηση, διότι αυτός ο εγκέφαλος ήταν κατεστραμμένος τελείως εκείνη την εβδομάδα που ήταν σε κόμμα.
And that, of course, as I said, is why the scientific community takes my story so seriously. An important feature of my journey was my amnesia, without any memory of Earth, humanity, Eben Alexander's life events. Now, it all started with what I call the earthworm's eye view, feeling roots or blood vessels all around me. It's like being in dirty jello. It seemed to go for ages, that initial phase. There came a slowly spinning white light that came packaged with a perfect musical melody. And as it was slowly spinning and came towards me, it opened up like a rip and led up into this brilliant, ultra-real gateway valley. Might think that a near-death experience would be kind of vague and dreamy and murky. This world, this material world, is vague and dreamy and murky. It was sharp and crystal clear and just really beautiful beyond description. There were millions of other butterflies, and we were above this incredibly verdant, fertile meadow. There were thousands of beings dancing in this meadow, incredible joy and festivity. And I remember very vividly dogs jumping, children playing, swooping orbs of pure kind of oval spiritual beings that when I came back to this world, I called them angelic choirs. Were emanating chants, anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness. It was a spiritual home that was very welcoming, wasn't alone. There was a beautiful young woman. She never said a word to me. She never had to. Her emotional truth were directly linked to my mind. It was her message, was the core message I was to bring back to this world. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for, and you can do no wrong. It was a way of loving, kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness. Because that's what transformed so many near-death experiencers to come back to this world far more loving. They come back more spiritual and yet often less religious. Fortunately, religions tend to pit us against each other and pretend that we're not all truly bound together through these forces of love. It turns out that this Gateway Valley was not a final endpoint. It was a stepping stone to something even grander. So those angelic choirs provided yet another portal. At that point, I was in what's called the core. When I entered that core realm, I was told, you are not here to stay. You'll be going back, but we'll teach you many things. But the interesting point for discussion right now is that I would spontaneously tumble back down and fall back to that earthworm eye view. And it was by remembering the musical notes, the melody. And then people often ask, what about that music? Do you remember it now? Hearing with the ears and it being vibrations of air molecules hitting the eardrums. Likewise, we can see far more than you can see with the eyes. You have knowledge through direct identification. But anyway, I would tumble back down to the earthworm eye view. And I made that journey several times and had multiple lessons, was teaching me a tremendous amount about the spiritual realm and consciousness. I learned as a neuroscientist, the brain does not create consciousness at all. And This is why when the brain and body die, it's not the end of conscious awareness. It's actually an expansion and growth. This is why it is such an adventure and nothing to be feared. For people who think, well, I don't like this life, I don't like this material world, why can't I just be up there forever in that heavenly realm? It's because we have work to do as souls in this realm. Eternal perfection doesn't contribute to the growth of the one mind. There did come a time, of course, where the melody didn't work. It no longer conjured up that beautiful light portal. To say I was sad at that time, but I also knew I could trust that I would be taken care of every time I passed through the core, through my guardian angel. And this is where I then witnessed thousands of beings going off around me into the distance, heads bowed, this murmuring energy coming up to me. But I was now to the earth were my view, and yet I felt this beautiful, loving, peaceful energy of being in a spiritual home coming from these beings around me. When I came back to this world weeks later, was the power of prayer. All these people with heads bowed, some holding candles, arms up in front of them, and that murmuring energy, even though I couldn't understand any of the words because of my amnesia, beautiful feeling of love and connection that was coming from that process. That I then saw 6 faces that would bubble up out of the muck. I can remember them as vividly as if that had all happened this morning. When I first saw them in the NDE, I did not recognize them. I had no idea who these beings were, but they were important because in the hours later, as I was waking up, and they turned out to be people, 5 of the 6 were physically present in the ICU room the last 24 hours I was in coma. And there were many family and friends who had been there earlier in the week who did not show up in those memories. And so to me, what was proved that the spiritual journey, which seemed to go on for months or years, had to happen between days 1 and 4 or 1 and 5 of a 7-day coma. I will also explain, though, that one of those faces that I saw was not physically present. I said 5 of 6 were physically there. It was an old friend of mine from college, actually. And then we lost track of each other, but my family knew that she had helped people who were in coma through channeling. She wrote a book called Third Eye Open. Her name is Susan Rinches. And when I woke up, I said, well, what about, and Susan, she was here. And they said, no, well, she was never physically there, that she channeled to me nights 4 and 5 of coma, that she helped me come back from this coma. And I remembered her as if she had been there physically. Of course, I knew by that point that in the spiritual realm, space and time are no longer impediments to communication between souls and spirit. Now, it was the 6th face, though, that drove me back to this world. A 10-year-old boy. It was my son, Bond. And I didn't recognize the doctors had held a family conference where they said I'd gone from a 10% chance of survival down to a 2% chance. That's why they were recommending stopping the antibiotics, letting me go. And of course, they'd protected Bond from the worst news during that week. When he overheard this, he came running down the hallway, pulled open my eyelids, one eye looking over there, one over there. Anybody in medicine knows that's a horrible picture. And I didn't see him with my eyes or hear him with my ears because my brain and sensory systems and all that were far too damaged by the meningitis. But somehow his pleading with me got through to me. Daddy, you're going to be okay. Daddy, you're going to be okay. And I didn't understand the words, didn't recognize him. But oh my gosh, now everything mattered. It was the toughest thing I've ever had to do in my life, was clawing my way back to this world, crawling out of this gravel pit. Wherever you reach up brings in all this tons of gravel and you can't get out. And yet somehow it happened. It took about 2 months for all of my memories to come back. So I realized the memories post-coma were more complete than the memories had been pre-coma. That's kind of astonishing, but it brings up the point that neurosurgeons are beginning to accept that long-term memories are not stored in the brain at all. It's one of the final nails in the coffin of materialist neuroscience.
Αυτό που εξηγεί παρακάτω ο Dr. Eben είναι κάτι στο οποίο επιμένει σε κάθε του συνέντευξη. Μας λέει ότι είναι το τέλος της κλασικής νευροεπιστήμης όπως την ξέραμε. Διότι από το 1950 γνωρίζαμε, και αυτό μαθαίναμε και εμείς στην ιατρική, ότι όλες οι μνήμες αποθηκεύονται στον εγκέφαλο. Όμως περιστατικά μεταθανάτιων εμπειριών, όπως αυτή του Dr. Eben, απέδειξαν ότι όταν καταστραφούν η μέση κροταφική λοβή, ο υπόκαμπος και οι συγγενικές δομές, επηρεάζεται μόνο η μετατροπή της βραχυπρόθεσμης μνήμης σε μακροπρόθεσμη. Αλλά αυτό δεν έχει καμία σχέση με την αποθήκευση της μακροπρόθεσμης μνήμης. Δεν αποθηκεύονται καθόλου στον εγκέφαλο.
They don't seem to be stored in the brain at all. I've spent the 15 years since my coma working with scientists around the world. There's a tremendous revolution going on in the scientific community, acknowledging the reality not only of near-death experiences, tremendous body of evidence supporting shared death experiences, telepathy, remote viewing. Anybody wants to get to know this revolution, read Living in a Mindful Universe, and you will certainly get an idea where this is all headed. One of the greatest gifts is realizing the power we have to bring wholeness and healing into our own lives.
Βλέπετε λοιπόν φίλοι μου ότι η νευροεπιστήμη, όπως και η φυσική, όπως και όλες οι επιστήμες πλέον, καταλήγουν στο ίδιο πράγμα. Ότι όλα έχουν να κάνουν με τη συνειδητότητα. Είδατε τι είπε, είναι σαν να μην βλέπεις με τα μάτια σου εκεί, μα και εδώ. Τι έχει αποδείξει τον Κάμπελ, τι μας δείχνει εκείνη η σχολή που έχω δείξει ένα βίντεο στη Γερμανία που μαθαίνει τα παιδιά να βλέπουν χωρίς μάτια, με κλειστά μάτια και οδηγάνε αυτοκινητάκια ή διαβάζουν. Διαβάζουν ενώ τα μάτια τους είναι τελείως κλειστά. Δεν βλέπουμε από τα μάτια μας, δεν ακούμε από τα αυτιά μας, διότι εδώ είναι VR, εδώ είναι μια εικονική πραγματικότητα. Αυτή είναι η τελευταία λέξη της επιστήμης. Αυτό πλέον αποδεικνύεται από την κάθε επιστημονική κοινότητα, είτε είναι νευροεπιστήμη, είτε είναι φυσική, από οπουδήποτε. Γι' αυτό και πλέον οι μεγαλύτεροι φυσικοί μας λένε δεν μπορεί να προχωρήσει παρακάτω η φυσική χωρίς την πνευματικότητα. Γι' αυτό και ξεχωρίζουμε στο Κορίνας Academy, γιατί γεφυρώνουμε την πνευματικότητα με την επιστήμη. Διότι η πραγματική επιστήμη δείχνει τη μία μοναδική αλήθεια, που η μία μοναδική αλήθεια είναι η συνειδητότητα. Όλα εξαρτώνται από εκεί. Όταν λοιπόν λειτουργείς μέσα από το πεδίο ύπαρξης και όχι με τεχνικούς τρόπους, τότε γίνονται όλα πολύ πιο εύκολα. Ακόμα και τηλεκίνηση, τηλεπάθεια, όλα αυτά βλέπετε τα λέει ένας νευροεπιστήμονας. Έτσι. Οπότε διάφοροι που μας κοροϊδεύουν όταν κάνουμε τηλεπάθεια, τηλεκίνηση, όταν μιλάμε για όλα αυτά και όταν τα πράττουμε όλα αυτά, έχουν μείνει λίγο πίσω. Το θέμα λοιπόν είναι να γεφυρώνουμε πάντα την επιστήμη με την πνευματικότητα. Χωρίς την πνευματικότητα δεν προχωράει πια το θέμα. Φιλιά πολλά σε όλους, σας αγαπώ πολύ.